You won't believe what he missed. Welcome back to the channel. If you believe in fate, second chances, and massive plot twists, hit that subscribe button and smash the like for this video. We're diving into the story of a ruthless CEO who thought he had everything until a shocking visit revealed he had lost the only thing that mattered. The ghosts in the high-rise. The rain had just stopped as Clara Jennings stood before the towering glass doors of Falcon Global HQ, her reflection shimmering on the polished surface. Her heart pounded so violently, she had to press her hand against her chest to calm the storm raging inside her. She hadn't been in this building in over 4 years, yet everything about it felt achingly familiar. The faint scent of polished marble, the distant hum of voices, the memory of his laugh echoing through these same hallways. She had spent years convincing herself she would never return, that she didn't need him. But life has a way of forcing the confrontations you least want to face. Clutched in each of her hands was a small, warm palm. 2 tiny figures stood beside her, both wide-eyed, gazing up at the imposing skyscraper that soared toward the clouds. Daisy and Willow were only 4 years old, yet they already mirrored her. Curious, cautious, and too wise for their age. They didn't yet understand why their mother looked so pale, why her lips trembled with every breath. All they knew was that she had told them they were going to meet someone very important today. Clara had rehearsed what she would say 100 times, whispering to herself in the silent night. She'd imagined every reaction he might have: anger, disbelief, perhaps even cold laughter. But no amount of preparation could change the fact that she was about to stand face to face with the man who had once held her heart and then shattered it into 1,000,000 pieces. When she told him she was pregnant, Alex Sterling, the multi-millionaire CEO, had accused her of lying, of trying to manipulate him for his money. She had pleaded with him to listen, showed him the evidence, cried until her throat burned. But he had simply looked at her with that cold, unreadable expression that had once made him such a brilliant businessman. Then he had walked out without a word. She remembered that night as if it were etched into her bones. The echo of the door slamming shut, the silence that followed, and the crushing realization that she was utterly alone. Clara packed her bags and left Manhattan within days, vanishing completely from his world. For years, she built a new life, working as a freelance designer, raising her daughters in a small coastal town in Maine where no one knew her past. There were sleepless nights, bills she didn't know how to pay, illnesses that made her want to collapse from exhaustion. But she never regretted keeping her children. They were her everything, her reason to breathe, her proof that love could still exist, even after betrayal. Yet, as she stood before the man who had once abandoned her, she felt that same suffocating fear she had worked so hard to bury. What if he didn't care? What if he turned his back again? She wasn't there to beg for money or forgiveness. She was there because her daughters deserved to know who their father was. They had recently started asking questions. Why don't we have a daddy? Why are our eyes blue when yours are brown? And when Willow looked up one night and said, maybe he just got lost, Clara knew she couldn't keep pretending forever. Do you think Alex has the right to see his daughters after what he did to Clara? Comment your opinion below. The lobby doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile that wavered slightly when she saw the 2 little girls holding their mother's hands. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. "I need to see Mr. Sterling," she managed to say. The woman blinked, hesitating. "Do you have an appointment?" Clara shook her head. "Tell him it's Clara." The receptionist's expression shifted, recognition flashing in her eyes. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Clara's stomach twisted as she watched her make the call. Minutes later, she was told to go up. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors finally opened, she stepped out into a hallway she once knew too well. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered in the air, subtle, but unmistakable. Her hands trembled as she knocked on his office door. A pause, then a deep voice said, "Come in." And there he was. Alex Sterling, the man she had loved, the man who had broken her heart, the man who didn't know he had 2 daughters with eyes identical to his own. He looked up from his desk, confusion flashing on his face before turning to shock. His pen slipped from his hand. For a moment, no one spoke. The air between them felt heavy, electric, as if something long buried had just been unearthed. Daisy squeezed her mother's hand and whispered, "Mommy, is that him?" Clara's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes, sweetie, that's him." The undeniable truth. Alex didn't move for what felt like a full minute. He looked from Clara to the 2 small girls who stood quietly beside her, their tiny hands wrapped around her fingers, their matching blue eyes wide with innocent curiosity. It was impossible to ignore the familiar curve of their mouths, the soft wave of their hair, the same deep brown shade he saw in the mirror every morning. His throat constricted, and for the first time in years, words failed him. "Hello, Alex." Her voice was quiet, but firm enough to shatter the silence between them. His name on her lips brought back 1,000 memories. Late nights in his penthouse, whispered promises that he now knew were lies. The way he used to look at her as if she were the only person who could quiet the chaos in his mind. Now, that same gaze was fixed on her. But it wasn't love he saw there. It was confusion, disbelief, and something dangerously close to fear. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "Clara," he finally said, and the sound of his voice was low, almost uncertain. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard. "I needed to see you. We needed to see you." His eyes dropped to the girls again, and his brow furrowed. "Who are they?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She had known he would ask, but hearing it aloud felt crueler than she expected. She took a step closer, her heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. "They are your daughters, Alex." He froze. His eyes narrowed, searching her face for any trace of deceit. "That's not possible," he said finally, his voice sharper now, the defensive tone of a man who had been blindsided. "Are you saying they're mine?" Clara held his gaze, forcing herself not to look away. "Yes, I told you 4 years ago I was pregnant. You didn't believe me then and you walked away." The color drained from Alex's face. The memory of that night flooded back. The argument, the accusations, her tears. He had been angry then, not because she was pregnant, but because he was terrified. He had told himself she was lying, that it was easier to cut her out than to face the chaos fatherhood would bring to his meticulously controlled world. He remembered the door slamming, her voice calling his name as he left. Now that same voice trembled as she stood before him, no longer pleading, only stating facts. "I didn't come here for anything," she said quietly. "No money, no help. I just thought you should know." Her calm unnerved him even more than anger would have. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the girls. They were whispering to each other now. Too young to understand the tension, but perceptive enough to feel it. One of them, Daisy, he would later learn, tilted her head and offered him a nervous smile. A small, shy smile that made something twist deep in his chest. He took a step forward before realizing what he was doing, his eyes drawn to her. "What are their names?" he asked, his voice softening without his permission. "I'm Daisy," she said, her voice clear and curious, pointing to her sister. "And she's Willow." Clara watched him closely, waiting for the moment he would turn cold again. But instead, he crouched down slightly, meeting the girls at eye level. For a moment, he saw himself reflected in their eyes, his own shade of blue staring back at him. The realization swept over him with a chill. He stood up abruptly and turned away, walking to the window as if the city skyline could somehow ground him. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, tormented. "Why now?" he asked without turning around. "Why after all this time?" "Because they started asking about you," Clara said simply, "and because I'm tired of hiding the truth." He remained silent for a long time, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched. Finally, he turned to face her again. "I need time," he said, his voice raspy. "I can't process this right now." Clara nodded, though her chest ached. "I understand. I didn't expect you to." She turned to the girls and whispered gently, "Come on, sweeties, let's go." They said their goodbyes without fully understanding, their small voices chanting, "Bye-bye, mister." And as they walked out of his office, Alex stood frozen, watching them leave. His heart caught somewhere between disbelief and a pain he didn't yet know how to name. Hit the like button if you think Alex has a lot of making up to do. The first step towards redemption. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. His penthouse, usually a place of comfort and order, felt suffocating. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. Two small girls with soft brown hair and piercing blue eyes, their small hands gripping Clara's as they stood in his office. He relived every detail, the way Daisy had smiled shyly, the calm certainty in Clara's voice when she said, "You already know." She was right. He knew. No DNA test could undo what his heart had already accepted. These children were his. He realized he had traded love for control, and in doing so, he had lost something far more valuable than any deal he had ever closed. The next morning, he couldn't concentrate on numbers, contracts, or profit margins. His mind kept returning to Clara's expression, not anger, but the exhaustion that comes from years of carrying everything alone. He remembered her fierce independence. "You'll realize that love isn't something you can schedule or sign a contract for," she had once said. He had laughed at her then. Now, he would give anything to go back and listen. Mid-morning, he gave up pretending to work. He grabbed his coat and left the building, ignoring the quizzical looks of his employees. He found himself driving, without planning it, to Clara's neighborhood. He parked across the street from a small, modest apartment building. He sat there for a long time, watching the rain begin to fall again. And then he saw them. Clara emerged with the girls, both bundled up in matching raincoats, their tiny boots splashing in puddles as they laughed. The sound carried even through his closed car window, pure and light, cutting through the heaviness inside him. He watched Clara crouch down to adjust Willow's hood, gently brushing a damp lock of hair from her face with such tenderness that his chest tightened. She had done it all without him. Every scraped knee, every fever, every sleepless night. She had been there, and he hadn't. Daisy spotted a puddle and jumped right in, splashing water everywhere. Clara laughed. The sound was soft and real, and in that moment, Alex felt something break inside him. It was no longer guilt. It was yearning. Yearning for what could have been, for what might still be, if he had the courage to reach for it. But he didn't get out of the car. He wasn't ready to face her again. Not when he still didn't know what to say. That night, he sat at his desk and opened a blank document. He started to write. Not a business plan, but a letter. The first words came slowly, his hands shaking as he typed. "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did, and I know what I lost because of it. I can't change the past, but I need to be part of their future, even if it's only from the sidelines. Please, let me try." For the first time in years, he felt something akin to hope. And that was enough to make him believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption wasn't impossible. The uncomfortable gesture. Clara had not expected to see him again so soon. When the knock came at her door that Saturday morning, she was still in her robe, her hair in a loose bun, the twins sitting at the table behind her eating heart-shaped pancakes. Alex was there. The same man who had once abandoned her now stood on her doorstep, his blue eyes searching her face. He looked different, not in the tailored suit he usually wore, but a simple dark sweater and jeans. There was something in his posture, something uncertain, almost hesitant, that she had never seen before. The powerful CEO looked for the first time, unsure of himself. "Hello," he said quietly. His voice was low, almost cautious. It was a single word, but it carried the weight of 4 lost years. Clara didn't answer at first. Her hand gripped the edge of the door. The girls had gone silent behind her, their giggles fading as they watched the strange man. Alex's eyes drifted to them, and something raw crossed his face. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. She stepped aside without a word, and he entered, his gaze taking in the small, cozy apartment, the scattered toys, the half-finished drawings on the fridge, the signs of a life he hadn't been there to witness. He seemed not to know where to stand, so he stayed near the door, his hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. "Girls," Clara said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "This is Michael. He's an old friend." The lie tasted bitter, but she couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth yet. "Why are you here, Alex?" she asked finally, without turning around. He took a deep breath. "Because I needed to see you, and them." "You already did," she said quietly. "In your office." "Not like this. I was in shock, Clara. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. About them." She turned then, meeting his gaze. The pain, the betrayal, the distance. It was all still there. But so was something else. The memory of what they once had. "You can't just walk in here and act like nothing happened," she said, her voice shaking. "You made your choice, Alex. You left." Slowly, guilt shone in his eyes. "I know, and I've regretted it every day since." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I was scared, Clara, of what it meant, of what I would have to give up. I thought I could live without you, without them. I was wrong." The honesty disarmed her. This wasn't the man who had shouted and accused. This was someone else. Someone stripped of pride and certainty. Someone trying awkwardly to make amends. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. He shook his head. "Nothing. I just want to know them. Even if you never forgive me." Small feet interrupted them. Daisy had climbed off her chair, holding something. A crayon drawing she had made that morning. She walked to Alex and handed it to him. "This is me and Mommy," she said proudly. "We made pancakes." He crouched to her level, his throat tightening as he looked at the wobbly lines, the smiling stick figures holding hands. "It's beautiful," he said. His voice was husky. "You're a great artist." Daisy smiled and looked at her mother. "Mommy, can he come next time we make pancakes?" The question hit Clara like a knife and a bombshell at the same time. She felt tears sting her eyes, but blinked them away. "Maybe," she said softly. Alex slowly rose, his gaze meeting hers again. "I'll go," he said after a moment, his voice rough. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed to see you, needed to see them." He turned to the door, stopping for a second before looking back. "They're perfect, Clara," he said quietly. "You did everything right. Thank you for watching. If you think Clara should give Alex a chance to earn her trust, drop a heart emoji in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Tuyet voi. Toi rut vui vi ban hai long vi ban viet vu roy. The Millionaire CEO learns to be a dad. Welcome back. You're watching the story of Alex Sterling's fight for a second chance. If you're rooting for this broken family to heal, hit that like button and share this video. We need to see if a man who abandoned his past can truly build a future. The slow path to trust. The following weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of emotions that neither Clara nor Alex could fully comprehend. After his unexpected visit, Alex couldn't get the image of the twins out of his mind. Every day at the office felt hollow. His focus broke every time he caught the faint reflection of his own eyes in the conference room glass. The same striking blue eyes staring back from Daisy and Willow's faces. He started driving by their neighborhood after work, parking discreetly across the street just to catch a glimpse. He watched from a distance as Clara took them to nursery in the mornings, her hands holding both of theirs as they skipped ahead, their giggles echoing down the quiet street. He saw them chase butterflies in the park and feed the ducks near the pond. Once he saw Daisy trip and scrape her knee, his entire body tensed, as if it were him who had fallen. But before he could react, Clara knelt, kissed the tiny injury, and wiped away the tears with such gentle care that he could barely breathe. That sight filled him with both awe and regret. She had been mother and father, strength and comfort, everything her daughters had needed, and she had done it all without him. One evening, unable to bear the distance any longer, he decided to reach out properly. He didn't want to simply show up and throw her life into chaos again. Instead, he wrote a letter. His second attempt, keeping it simple, honest, and stripped of excuses. Clara, I don't expect to be forgiven. I don't deserve it. But I would like to know them, even just a little. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to be part of their lives, however you allow it. He slipped the letter into her mailbox late one night when her apartment lights were off. Clara found it the next morning. She stood at the door, her hands trembling as she read his words. She had expected anger, blame, perhaps self-pity, but what she found instead was sincerity. It terrified her more than his arrogance ever had. She folded the letter slowly, unable to decide what to do. All day at work, her thoughts kept returning to him. He had always been a force of nature, powerful, relentless, impossible to ignore. But now she saw a man stripped of all that, and it hurt her heart in ways she didn't want to admit. That weekend, watching the girls play, Clara made her decision. She dialed his number for the first time in years. The moment she heard his voice on the other end, all the words she had planned vanished. "You can see them," she said simply, her tone firm but cautious. There was a pause, then a quiet intake of breath that sounded like disbelief. "Thank you," he said softly. "Just don't make me regret it," she replied. And she ended the call. Fatherhood on a park bench. They met at the park the following afternoon. Alex arrived early, wearing a casual shirt and jeans again. He wanted to appear approachable, though his nerves betrayed him. When Clara arrived with the girls, they paused for a moment, seeing him sitting on a bench, holding 2 small teddy bears he had bought on impulse that morning. The twins approached cautiously, clinging to their mother's hands. "Hello," he said, his voice shaking despite his efforts to sound calm. "Hello?" Lily repeated, her eyes glued to the toys. He smiled gently and held them out. "I thought maybe you two could use some new friends." They hesitated before taking them, and when Willow hugged hers tightly, something in his chest eased for the first time in years. Clara stayed close, arms crossed, watching the exchange carefully. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. The girls were shy at first, but curiosity soon won. They asked him about his car, his watch, and if he knew how to make pancakes. When he said no, Daisy laughed and said, "Then Mommy can teach you." Clara rolled her eyes, but couldn't help smiling at their innocent audacity. Alex sat with them on the grass, helping them build a small castle out of sticks and flowers, his expensive watch glinting in the sunlight as he worked with clumsy fingers. At one point, Willow looked up and asked, "Do you have any other kids too?" The question hit him like a punch. He swallowed and shook his head. "No," he said softly. "Just you two." She tilted her head, confused but satisfied, and then went back to arranging her flowers. Clara's breath hitched, her throat tight as she turned away, pretending to watch the ducks. She hadn't expected this moment to be so raw. She hadn't expected him to look so human. As the sun began to set, Clara called the girls. "Say goodbye, sweeties. Time to go." They gave him quick hugs, both mumbling a shy "Bye, Alex," before running towards the car. Alex lingered for a moment, his chest tight, his hands trembling. Clara stayed a moment longer, turning to face him. "They like you," she said quietly. "More than I expected. But don't make promises you can't keep. They've never been disappointed before. I won't let you be the first." He nodded, his voice low. "I won't. I swear." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. Then she simply said, "We'll see," and walked away. He stood there until they disappeared from view, the fading laughter of his daughters echoing in the distance. For the first time in his life, he realized that success wasn't about closing deals or signing contracts. It was about earning the right to hear those small voices call him something he had never been before: a father. The unexpected domesticity, the days that followed, were both the most fragile and the most hopeful of Alex's life. Following that first park encounter, Clara reluctantly agreed to let him see the girls once a week. She was cautious, constantly watching for any sign that he would vanish again. But he didn't. He began to rearrange his schedule, canceling late meetings, leaving the office before sundown, and telling his assistant not to bother him on certain afternoons. His colleagues were stunned. The man who once measured time and profits now measured it in hours spent on a playground. Every visit was a new layer of discovery. The girls were infinitely curious. They asked him about everything from why the sky was blue to why his watch ticked so loudly. He found himself answering with a patience he didn't know he possessed. They laughed when he tried to braid their hair and failed miserably, and he learned that Daisy loved to draw, while Willow preferred climbing trees. Clara watched these meetings with a mixture of pride and unease. She couldn't deny that he was trying. There was no arrogance in him anymore, no sense of entitlement. He listened to the girls, paid attention to what made them happy, and treated them with a tenderness she had never seen from him before. Yet every time he smiled at them, she felt a pang of fear. He had broken her once so completely that trusting him again felt dangerous, like standing near a cliff edge and pretending not to look down. One evening, Alex offered to walk them home. The girls skipped ahead, chasing fireflies along the pavement while Clara and Alex followed. The air was warm, the sun melting into the horizon. For a time, they walked in silence, the sound of laughter filling the space between them. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice low. "They like you," she said. "More than I expected." He smiled faintly. "I like them more than I thought I was capable of liking anyone." She looked at him, her expression softening for a moment before hardening again. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." He stopped walking. "I mean every word." If you could give Alex one piece of advice to win back Clara's trust, what would it be? Tell us in the comments. The sincerity in his gaze made her heart race. She looked away quickly, focusing on the girls ahead. But the truth of his words lingered. A few days later, Alex invited them to his company's family charity event, a carnival-like night in a local park, complete with games, food, and music. Clara hesitated, but the twins were excited, and against her better judgment, she agreed. When they arrived, she saw the stunned faces of his colleagues as he walked in, not with a model or a business partner, but with a woman and two small girls holding his hand. He didn't care about the whispers or the curious stares. For the first time, he felt proud. Proud to be standing next to her. Proud to show the world what mattered most. The night was filled with laughter and light. The girls got their faces painted, danced under the string lights, and dragged him to every game booth. Clara watched from the side, her heart caught between disbelief and quiet joy. At one point, Alex caught her eye from across the field, and his gaze held hers longer than it should have. For a fleeting second, the noise and chaos around them disappeared, leaving only that familiar pull between them, one that had never truly left. As the night ended and the girls fell asleep in the back seat, Clara turned to him. "They had fun," she said softly. "So did I," he smiled faintly. Then, after a pause, he added, "I don't want this to end, Clara. I don't want to keep pretending we're just two people who share a past. We share a future too, whether you want to admit it or not." Her breath hitched, and she turned to look out the window, unsure how to respond. The city lights blurred, and in that moment, she realized she was on the verge of something dangerous again, something she might not survive if it went wrong. But deep down, despite every warning her mind screamed, her heart whispered something different. Maybe, just maybe he was right. Don't go anywhere. Smash that subscribe button, because the next part will decide if Clara and Alex can truly heal and be a family. Tu vet voi. Tôi rất vui vì bạn đã đắm chìm vào câu chuyện. The breaking point. Can she ever forgive him? Welcome back, loyal subscribers. We're at the critical moment. After Alex's shocking declaration, Clara is walking a tightrope between fear and hope. Can a grand gesture heal 4 years of betrayal? Hit like if you think this is their last chance. The uncomfortable quiet and a simple request. The morning after the charity event brought a calm that Clara hadn't felt in years, yet underneath it was a tension that wouldn't let her rest. Seeing Alex with the girls had been almost unbearable. He had laughed with them, chased them across the lawn, carried them on his shoulders, as if he had always belonged there. There was no trace of the cold, distant man she once knew. That scared her more than the memory of his cruelty ever had, because now he was no longer the villain. He was becoming human again, too real, too close to what her heart still craved. She spent most of this day pretending everything was normal, all while battling the ache in her chest. Every time she saw their smiles, she saw pieces of him. She couldn't escape him, even in the smallest details of their lives. Alex, meanwhile, couldn't stop replaying the night in his mind. He hadn't meant to say they had a future in the car, but once the words were out, he couldn't take them back. He had seen something in Clara's eyes before she turned away, something that made him believe she felt it too. For the first time, hope didn't feel foolish. It felt possible. He wanted to prove his change, not just with words, but with actions. Over the next few days, he called every evening to check on the girls, never forcing the conversation, never overstepping. Clara no longer hung up coldly, and sometimes even laughed at something he said. He treasured these small victories more than any deal he had ever closed. One Friday afternoon, he asked if he could pick the girls up from the nursery. Clara hesitated for a long moment before agreeing, with strict instructions about their routine. Hichiaoi arrived early, sitting nervously in his car as the children flooded out of the building in a wave of laughter and backpacks. When the twins saw him, their faces lit up and they ran straight into his arms, shouting his name. For a man who once measured success in numbers, that moment redefined everything. He felt something unlock inside him, a tenderness that had nothing to do with control or power. As they walked to the car, Daisy chattered non-stop about a drawing she had made, while Willow hummed softly in the back seat. When he glanced at them in the rearview mirror, their reflections felt like sunlight breaking through a storm he thought would never end. When they arrived home, Clara was waiting at the door. The sight of them together, his hand resting protectively on Daisy's shoulder, Willow clinging to his sleeve, made her heart twist. They were perfect, he said softly, handing her the girls' backpacks. She smiled despite herself. Of course they were. He lingered for a moment before asking, "Can I stay for dinner?" The question hung in the air between them. The girls immediately started chanting, begging her to say yes. She hesitated, torn between instinct and emotion, before finally nodding. Fine. But you're helping. That night felt like something out of another life. Alex helped set the table, clumsily following Clara's directions, while the girls danced around the kitchen. They cooked pasta and garlic bread together, simple, yet warm. And for the first time in years, laughter filled the house without hidden tension underneath. After dinner, the twins put on a small show, singing a silly song they'd learned at school, while Alex applauded and cheered like the proudest father in the world. When it was bedtime, he read them a story, his deep voice softening as their eyelids began to droop. Clara stood in the doorway, watching the scene with tears in her eyes. The sight was almost too much to bear. For years, she had carried everything alone, never allowing herself to imagine what it would be like to have someone share the weight. And now, seeing him there, whispering goodnight to their daughters, she felt something inside her begin to shift. The truth is the only way out. When he returned to the living room, she handed him a cup of tea. Neither of them spoke for a while. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. "I missed so much," he said quietly, "and I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I want to be here, Clara. For them. For you, if you'll let me." She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "You left me when I needed you most," she said, her voice shaky but steady. "You made me feel like nothing." He nodded slowly, his expression pained. "I know. I was a coward. I thought I could erase what scared me by pretending it didn't exist. But I've been paying for that every single day." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. "You can't fix everything with words, Alex. You can't just walk in and expect me to trust you again." He moved closer, his tone gentle but firm. "Then let me earn it. Let me show you. Not tell you." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But her heart still carried scars too deep to ignore. "You can't just erase the past," she whispered. "I don't want to," he replied. "I just want a future that doesn't repeat it." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock and the quiet breathing of the girls in the next room. Then, almost without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, hesitant and trembling, but it was enough for his eyes to close in relief. They stayed like that for a while, two people standing in the ruins of their past, unsure of what the future held, but finally willing to face it together. That night, after he left, Clara sat on the sofa long after the lights were out. She could still feel the warmth of his hand against hers, the firmness of his voice when he spoke about change. She didn't know if she could ever fully forgive him, but for the first time, forgiveness didn't feel impossible. Outside, the night was quiet, the kind of stillness that precedes a beginning. Not an end, but a fragile new start waiting to unfold. The family is rebuilt. Weeks passed, and what started as fragile attempts at coexisting slowly grew into something neither of them had expected. Alex began coming over more often, not just for visits, but to help. He took the girls to school, attended Clara's freelance client meetings when she needed support, and even fixed the leaky faucet in her kitchen one Saturday afternoon. It was strange to see him kneeling on the floor in a t-shirt and jeans, sleeves rolled up, looking utterly out of place, yet fitting in as if he always had. The girls adored him, and their laughter filled the house in a way that softened everything hard and cold that had once lived within those walls. Clara found herself watching him sometimes when he didn't realize, trying to reconcile this version of him with the man who had once completely shattered her heart. She didn't trust easily, but it was becoming harder to deny what she saw in front of her. This wasn't an act. This was real. He had changed, not just out of guilt, but because he wanted to. His colleagues noticed the shift, the softness in his expression, the way he smiled more often, the fact that he left work on time instead of drowning in late-night deals. He had spent so long trying to build an empire that he had forgotten to build a home. And now, for the first time, he had found one. But rebuilding trust was not simple. Clara still carried her doubts like invisible scars. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, she sat across from him at the kitchen table. "Why now, Alex?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you have to lose everything to realize what you wanted?" He hesitated, looking into his cup for a long time before answering. "Because I was afraid," he said softly. "Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid of losing control. You and the girls made me feel something I couldn't manage, and I ran from it. But running from it hurt more than anything else." She studied him in silence, her heart split between understanding and anger. "You can't expect me to just forget it," she whispered. "I don't," he said, meeting her eyes. "I just want to give you new memories, better ones, ones that make the old ones fade." The way he said it, quiet, sincere, almost pleading, made her chest constrict. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to, and maybe a small part of her already did. But believing meant risking everything again. Then, one rainy afternoon, Clara fell ill. It wasn't serious, but exhaustion and stress had caught up to her. When Alex came to pick up the twins and found her pale and shaking, he didn't hesitate. He took charge as if it were the most natural thing in the world, making soup, keeping the girls entertained, tidying the house. "You've done this alone for too long," he said softly. "Let me help." That night, after tucking in the twins, he sat beside her on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. The rain beat gently against the windows, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest, to let someone else hold the weight for her. The next morning, she woke up to the smell of coffee and found the girls giggling in the kitchen while Alex was unsuccessfully attempting to make pancakes. He looked up, smiling sheepishly. "I may have burned a few," he admitted. The sight made her laugh, a real, carefree laugh. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Quiet, but undeniable. He looked at her the way he used to before everything went wrong, and she didn't look away. The weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of their lives began to merge naturally. The girls started calling him Daddy without hesitation one afternoon, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The word nearly brought him to his knees. Clara watched, tears in her eyes, realizing that maybe some endings were meant to lead back to beginnings, after all. Months later, Alex took them all on a weekend trip to the coast. They stood together on the beach, the wind tangling Clara's hair as the girls ran barefoot in the sand. Alex watched them for a long time before turning to her. "I used to think my greatest achievement was what I built. The company, the deals, the empire," he said softly. "But standing here, I realize none of that means anything without this, without you." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with tears she didn't try to hide. "You broke me once," she whispered. "I know," he said, "and I will spend the rest of my life proving I can heal what I broke." He reached out slowly, brushing his fingers against hers. And this time she didn't pull away. The waves crashed against the shore. The girls' laughter echoed in the salty air, and for the first time in years, everything felt right. Clara realized that she was no longer afraid. The past had hurt them both, but it had also led them here, to this moment, to this love rebuilt from ruin, stronger than before. As the last light faded, she smiled, knowing that some stories don't end with loss. They end where they were always meant to begin. A family, Not perfect, not without scars, but complete. What an incredible journey of redemption and healing. Thank you for following Clara and Alex's story. Let me know in the comments. What was the most impactful moment of Alex's redemption for you? Don't forget to subscribe for more astonishing real-life plot twists.